Hello, and welcome to the first episode of our new podcast and YouTube series, all about your attention span, who's trying to get a hold of it, and why. I'm Claire Coady, the founder of the Attention practice based here in London. I've worked with huge brands, governments, and organizations across the world in strategy and communications. And for my sins, I've known you, James, for over 20 years.
Yeah, we met at university. I then went off to spend 20 years as a journalist, a broadcaster, and a general jack of all trades at the BBC. And having left in this summer, which as we speak, 2025, I was looking for a new project or two, and I saw Claire had put this fascinating post up on Substack all about her new role, her new job, and the role of attention. So, Claire, let's start there. What is this all about?
Well, so I'll try not to go back too far into ancient history, but James, when you and I met, we met through the radio station at our university.
Yeah.
And I was also on one of the student newspapers as well, the more tabloidy one. And I realized pretty quickly I was never meant to be a journalist. You're a very good journalist. People like you made me realize within a couple of months that that was not actually what I was going to do. But what I was really interested in was media, was ideas, and the way people share and engage in culture and ideas and how they spread. And at the time, of course, this was around the time Google was invented.
Right.
So
yeah.
We're going
We're
right
that
back
old.
here.
We are that old.
We're that old. We are that old. Anyway, so I ended up spending my career moving into that. My master's thesis, I focused on the way news was constructed, but it was started at the same time that YouTube was founded. And that ended up taking me into a career eventually in advertising, where I went to work for big global agencies on big global brands, looking at their big challenges in reaching people, persuading people, getting people to pay attention to what they're doing. But my role in that, really, the way I came into it was being fascinated anyway by what made people sit up, think, pay attention, share stuff. And that's continued pretty much through my career. So I went to work with governments, NGOs, organizations, applying those skills to big social problems. So still understanding what people pay attention to, what motivates them, what gets them to change, why people do things the way they do them. And in that time, I started to notice two things. So one, on the commercial side, we started to see a decline in performance of media in anything that we would track. And there were lots of explanations for this, but, people were dancing around more the tactics than the bigger issue.
And when you mean performance, what do you mean? You mean like
question.
the amount of people watching stuff, right?
The amount of people watching stuff. So how easy is it to reach people? How much does it cost to do that?
Yeah.
How long do they stay attuned to it? And with digital media, you can now track this in a very granular way.
Okay.
So we start to see the price go up and the amount spent go up to reach the same amount of people. But at the same time, they were spending less time with that too, and seeming to remember less as well. It was getting much, much, much harder to cut through. And on top of that, the answer being provided was proliferation of channels, of formats, of outputs. So more media all the time, because the problem seemed to be, people talked about it as fragmentation, but actually it was probably consolidation. On the social side, on the big social problems, we also started to see challenges too. And that was, some of the challenges that we talk about: polarization, fragmentation, mis and disinformation, cut through. But we also have started to see that there's been sharpening of attitudes. So for a long time, most people are kind of in the middle of things, right? They don't want things to move too fast. They don't want things to move too slow. And overnight, you start to see this collapse and this maybe not quite overnight, but collapse, polarization, and then being confronted as well with the same challenges that the commercial side was facing in actually reaching people, persuading them, getting them to engage, to change their minds.
So what you're saying basically is that people's attention spans have really waned over the last few years.
Yeah, that seemed to be the problem. And I think everyone broadly agreed on that, right? We have Jonathan Haidt's book on the anxious generation talking about both those attention spans fragmenting and the anxiety that that's causing in children. And there's been a lot written on that subject. And if you work in commercial media or in advertising, or you work in this, in the field that does more public sector work, it's something you're paying attention to. You are aware that fragmentation and attention spans falling is a problem. But maybe what you're not thinking about deeply is, why is that exactly? we talk roughly about screens, but actually, if we're talking about attention, what we're really talking about is a process that happens in your body. And so, why is that happening? And why now? Why not 10 years ago? Why not 20 years ago? Why not 50 years ago? So, one of the things I started looking into when I became independent a few months ago and started setting up the attention practice was really what are some of the mechanisms that underpin this? Now, the one I already was very familiar with was Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, System 1, System 2, which we'll go into in more detail later. But
Okay.
the other thing was that there's actually been quite a lot of work done in the last few years on the neurology of attention and the bodily processes of that. And looking into that led me to see that actually attention is finite. It's renewable, but it's more slowly renewable than we think. And multiple stresses on it can affect it. So it made me look at the problem not as a problem of reaching people or performance or individuals struggling to cope with attention, but actually being overwhelmed. It's a supply problem.
Okay, so there's so many areas that this covers. I mean, this isn't
Yeah.
just about, individuals. It's about society, about the effects that it has on that and all of those things.
Yeah.
But look, let's just start with this episode. By the end of this episode, we're going to try and lay out the problem, right? So
Yes.
we'll have hopefully, a really good idea as to what the problem with attention really is. And then over the course of the series, we're going to hear from some great guests. We're going to try and work out what, if anything, happens next, if it's all over, if we're done for, if there is hope at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully there is. There is. And who's looking at it, who's tackling it, right? And all of those things. Also, we want to hear from you. You can email us. We're going to put the details in the show notes. It's the email address. I'll read it out once. It's canwehaveyourattention@protonmail.com. If you missed that, it's in the show notes. Go and have a look at it. But let's crack on. Right, so Claire, let's lay out the problem, okay? And let's start with the obvious question. Obvious for me, anyway. What do we mean by attention, and what do we mean by the attention economy, which is kind of what the basis of this is all about?
So, great question. And it sounds obvious for what attention means, but actually, no one has a really good definition for it, which is kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I think the earliest one was probably the godfather of psychology. I think he said something like it's what you focus on. But actually, I think we know that focus does not quite encompass all of it, because so much of what we do is unintentional. So
yeah, and just
the
to
way
check, who is the godfather of psychology? Because I'm not an expert in this. Are we how old are we talking here?
We're talking 1890.
Right. Okay. I mean, Freud. Are we back to
William James? So a name no one knows. He said, everyone knows what attention is. It's the taking possession by the mind in clear and vivid form of one out of what seem to be several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought.
That's really interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know about William James.
So I was trying to get the exact quote.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you. This is great. This is all good knowledge. This is the stuff that people are hopefully tuning in for.
Yeah.
So carry on. Tell me more about the attention economy,
that is our
right?
definition of attention, or that's the definition of attention that I think most of us kind of work with in our own minds, right? But over time, of course, we've learned that attention isn't necessarily guided deliberately, right?
Right.
Entire industries, including the technology industry, including the advertising industry, including media and communications and news, have been built around figuring out ways to circumvent, effectively conscious decision-making about where you point your attention.
Yeah. So the idea is that you get, whatever it is in big lights. I mean, let's be obvious about it, right? Because that's trying to grab your attention is if you put a sign in big lights.
Exactly.
Blah, 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 like that.
Loud things.
Right. It's all about trying to circumvent your natural thing to go, oh, here we are, big shiny thing.
Exactly. It's all about,
right?
Because people who work in any form of, the attention economy, which we'll come on to, they're all competing with each other, right? And they're competing for your attention. They're competing for your mind. And the way to do that is not by asking politely. It's by, shouting, redirecting it. And so now we've gotten to the stage where we live in a world where everything is kind of shouting at you, whether you need it or not. And it could be quietly, it could be nudging, it could be something more ostentatious than that. But ultimately, that's what it's doing, because it's also competing with your dog, your cat, your kids, your spouse, your parents, your neighbors, your extremely loud teacher,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, yeah. All of those things,
whatever
right?
your boss, like whatever domain of your life. Yeah,
Okay, cool. So that's what attention is,
that's what
right?
attention
And
is.
we've got and the attention economy, is that different or is that
So the attention economy, I think, without going into extreme detail, let's call it every part of the commercial or government side that is working to direct your attention to something outside of your personal space.
yeah.
Right.
Okay. So it's
Okay, fine.
basically, I mean, when we talk about the attention economy, we're basically talking about the world. We're talking about the
We're
world's
talking about the
attempts to
world.
get
Yeah,
your attention and everyone else's attention and all of
exactly.
those things. And on, whether that's newspapers or TV or radio or whatever it
Or
is,
social
or
media, right?
social media or businesses or brands or whatever. It's just
Yeah.
all of that. Okay,
So
cool.
it's vying for your attention,
Yeah,
getting
right.
it, holding it, maintaining it, getting you to come back. That's it.
Now you've laid out what kind of a problem we've got, you
Yeah.
think, with attention. Let's go into that a bit more, right? So how big a problem is the problem that you think we have with attention at the moment?
I think it's really significant, not just because it's, you talk to so many people, and particularly research, and no matter how old they are, how exposed they are, everyone is pretty tired. And you can
I'm
almost,
exhausted,
you're exhausted,
right?
I'm exhausted,
Yeah.
everyone's exhausted. But like everyone is exhausted. It's really, really funny. If you ask
Mm.
people about the news in particular, their faces just fall. Like you could see their whole body language collapse because it's exhausting. It's
Yeah.
exhausted.
And look, I'll tell you from my perspective, right, as a journalist. So the things that get talked about a lot in newsrooms, or certainly news boardrooms, I guess, at the moment, are things like news avoidance. And
Yeah.
that's happening because people are sick of the news. And when they say sick of the news, I'm sure they're sick of the fact that it's miserable all the time. But I think they're also sick of it because it's just too much, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think even people, I think you and I, we can both say that, we are probably those weird kids who stole our parents' newspapers
Yeah, yeah,
and secretly
absolutely.
listened to the radio, right?
Apparently, I used to eat The Guardian when I was 18 months old. But there we go.
That's amazing. My mom told me that she had to cancel our Time subscription
Yep.
when I was about 8 because I kept coming downstairs and asking what's genocide. Um,
Good,
which
good.
is,
I like that.
yeah. I mean,
You know. But yes, you're right.
weirdos.
We are those weird
We
kids.
are those weirdos. But,
Yeah.
When you work in news, I think, and when you work in, or anything adjacent to it, if you work in politics, communications, media, that kind of thing, you are the people who grew up obsessed with news.
Yeah.
And I don't think we've lived in a time where all the people working in this environments are suddenly like, I can't take it anymore.
Yeah. And to be, brutal about it, I know in my own newsrooms that I've worked in, including myself, there's been an awful lot of people go off with stress in the last few years.
Yeah.
And these are people who are, you would think, not the ones prone necessarily to going off with stress, right? To be brutal about it.
You have to have a degree of just, I used to describe this as like stabby, I'm going to swear.
Oh, fine. Swear. That's what it's all about.
Stabby
Right?
shit kickery to go into journalism. You have nerves of steel. Do you remember when we were at university, the editor of one of the student newspapers, I used to joke, I was like, this guy, he's doing a politics degree. He does not have a political opinion. He doesn't, but he's a brilliant journalist because he knows it's about the story. He lives on airwaves gum and Red Bulls, and he will hunt you down with a long lens camera.
And you know what? He's still doing it.
He's a very successful,
right?
You know what I'm talking about. He's a very successful journalist.
Talking about. Yeah.
That man was born to be a journalist.
Absolutely.
You can imagine now he might be the kind of person who would also go off with stress because it's not just the stories you're confronting, it's the amount you're expected to produce and do.
Yeah.
Everyone thinks that because things are shorter, they're somehow easier to make. And that's not true at all. There is a cost to doing that. There's a cost to switching on the camera, to switching your own attention, to covering these different stories. Everything takes bandwidth. And so doing 5 short things is not the same as doing 1 long thing. Doing 5 short things is almost the same as doing 5 long things. It's not about the time you're spending. It's about the amount you're having to switch into thinking.
Yeah. And so are we just talking about the media here? Because we're not really.
We're not just talking about the media.
There's so many other areas that this affects too.
Very much so. So I'm talking, you and I, have naturally gone into the media part, but there's
Yeah.
a couple of things that I think are particularly, or we can start to see particular evidence that this is affecting it. So one is actually from, let's talk about it from the business side, right? What the attention economy, the structure of it, what it's done is it's generated a lot more information, but sometimes you can have too much information. That is a thing, and that can paralyze decision making. Because you then, in your mind, you worry that you will have missed something. So you'll pursue it and pursue it and pursue it until you don't make a decision, and that causes its own form of collapse.
Mm.
So I think we're seeing that to a degree in some sectors of the economy, and particularly in business, where that overabundance of information is paralyzing decision making, particularly during times of stress or crisis, or when a fast decision needs to be made.
Yeah, and just to give an idea on that too much information thing, you told me off air a great stat about the amount of adverts that people see every day,
Yes.
right? And
Yeah,
it
yeah.
blew my mind.
Yeah, this is all guesstimates, of course.
Yeah.
But Americans in particular are very overexposed to advertising. But if you live in a highly developed media economy, and the UK is within that, you're exposed to an estimate of between 700 and 1,200 ads every day.
Just adverts.
Just ads, just adverts in various formats. Most of that will be coming through digital media, but there is also out-of-home advertising, so billboards, posters, television advertising, radio advertising, leaflets, pamphlets. Like,
Yeah.
you will come into contact with advertising probably every second of your life
Which is,
in multiple forms.
for me, amazing, right? Like that.
Yeah.
That's an incredible thing. And over the last few years, because it's become so much more difficult for companies and brands to get that piece of your attention,
Yeah.
it's felt to me that the advertising has ramped up. So
It has.
right. So on Instagram, for example, you might have previously seen one advert every 20, 30 pictures, and now you see it every 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I was, sort of monitoring last night as I was going through Instagram myself. And I think I saw an ad for every 2 scrolls.
Okay.
At least, which is a lot. It's still a lot.
So look, we talked a bit about the media and the fact that
Yeah.
people are exposed to so many things.
Yeah.
Just very briefly, give us an idea of what this means for society as a whole, do you think? Because all these people, a bit burnt out, a bit frazzled, struggling for attention. What does that mean for us?
Okay, so let's go quickly back to the mechanics of attention, right? And we'll probably touch on this in every episode. But the main thing is that what we've learned over the last few years, or what I should say neuroscientists have learned in particular over the last few years, is that there is a cap on the amount of energy that can go to your brain. And that means there's a cap on your attention. Now, the way we've conceived of attention is that it's pretty neutral. It's probably expansive. It looks like it's been expansive until now. So why would we think it's any different? But the reality is that it is. And a lot of that you can see, there's a visual description of this. So there'll be like a little picture up of this. But I had a ultrasound of my carotid artery done last month. And that ultrasound, you can see really clearly in it, the branch of this artery where it's your body effectively allocating the energy that goes to your face to keep it functioning. So your eyes working, I'm talking, right? There's energy it takes to move my mouth. But the other goes to your brain. Now, your brain is 2% of your body's weight, and it takes 15 to 20% of your body's energy. So your body's already being pretty generous with the amount it's going to give it. A certain amount of that, and most of that actually will just go to the functioning of the brain, right? So firing the neurons that it takes to keep you alive, upright, awake, asleep, whatever it is you're doing. But the rest of that goes to figuring out how to process the world around you, and that's attention. Attention is how you interact with the world. Most of that attention span, we think about this going back to Kahneman and Tversky, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. I think we've heard thinking fast, thinking slow. And if you've come into contact with that theory, it's that basically most of your decisions are made in the fast mode of thinking, right? Automatic, instinctive, bias prone, and instantaneous. And 95% of the decisions you make in your daily life go through that system. Rough estimate.
Right, okay.
Right, fine. And that includes things like I lift my hand. That's thinking fast, right? But also like how you choose brands of chocolate or, and the reason it does that is because the slow part is what you allocate to the things that need it. So the example they use most often is thinking about maths problems. Fast is 2 + 2 = 4. You wrote learning, it's still that. But if I asked you 875 plus 336, you'd have to take a minute to work that
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
And taking anything longer than a second is slow thinking. The reality is your body prioritizes that for the things that matter to you in your life, right? So your family, your friends, your society, your work, that's the 5%. It prioritizes that. But there's also a world where it doesn't get enough attention because if you read it more carefully and if you read the neuroscience behind it, what you start to see is that it's not these systems working in tandem. It's not a piece of information comes in and it goes, system one, I'll take it. Fast thinking, I'll take it. It's actually fast thinking acts as the doorman to the rest of the
Right.
brain, right?
Okay.
So the information that comes at the brain, it handles it first. And every once in a while, system two will come online to just check that the right decision's been made. The problem is that as information comes in, just the process of coming into contact with it takes energy. And if fast thinking, system one, is taking all the energy just to deal with it, system two doesn't have enough to come online. And system two is not just the one where it's thinking through complicated math problems, even if, at any level. It's also the one that thinks about change or changing your mind, changing your opinion, trusting people. Should you trust this person? Should you trust this piece of information? And if it doesn't come online, it never learns to do that. It leaves everything to system one. And system one is not just bias prone, it's also very protective of you. So in the past, protection meant distrust. It meant erring on the side of caution, maybe not acting, not doing, or fight on the other side, right?
So in other words, what we've ended up in a situation with is because of this massive amount of media of one sort form or another that we need to kind of, we imbibe every day, even if we don't really want to or need to.
Yeah.
Because of that, the amount of energy that's actually going to our brain is limited anyway. We can only do so much. We are getting
Here's your
not
brain.
only exhausted, right?
Yeah.
We are getting burnt out, but also we are then retreating into our kind of, I want to sound like caveman days of just like, I'm going to do the thing that protects me.
Yeah.
And, we don't trust anybody because that kind of stuff takes thought.
You'll defer to fight or flight. And I think
Absolutely,
we see that.
right?
That's the polarization. Fight or flight.
Okay, listen.
As well.
Right, two things. We need to have more nightclub bouncer references, I think, in our conversation. Excellent. I'm also going to do a reading list, I think, in the show notes.
Yeah.
So anything that you mention, we'll try and put a note to in the show notes. So go and find out a bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look, I think we've covered a bit of like the sectors and the individuals and whatever and where we're up to, because this covers everything.
It does,
We've got
right?
so much to go into.
It's also worth saying that like the information is just one part of it, right? If you're living in any form of stress, like inflation, money worries, divorce, like you name it, that also takes toll on it too. So not helped as well by the times we're living in. If you're worried about paying your heating bill, getting an additional 400 ads a day is not going to help your ability to thrive.
Right, Claire, now you've made us feel all very miserable about the terrible things that are happening to us.
That's what I'm here for.
I know. You said at the start, this isn't game over. This isn't all terrible. Is there a way, is there a path forward for humanity?
I think there is a path forward. So one is that although and it might feel like you're crashing and burnt out and just done, funnily enough, that is your body's response telling you to take it easy. And sometimes that protective instinct does actually help make changes that are productive. So if we think about like these kinds of things we're describing often happen to people at least once in their life. I just read a great book called Wintering by Katherine May. Highly recommend everyone read it. It's not, you look at it, you think it's going to be like fluffy little self-help, but actually it's, she talks a lot about that process of going through basically burnout and what you do and how it makes you feel. And one of the points that she makes in that book is that everyone will go through this at least a few times in their life, notwithstanding information onslaught, and that in those periods, you don't just learn those skills of how to cope with it, but it helps you renew and engage better. And I think the fact, there are some indications that this is happening on a mass level, that people are checking out of social media a little bit in particular, or just media in general, or trying to figure out ways to regulate their exposure to information.
It almost sounds to me like the way you described it then, it's like the grief stage that people used to go through, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right. So, if you lost a family member or something awful happened, you would have this period of grief in which you would spend your time looking after yourself and looking after your family and and that's kind of, you're talking about that on a societal scale.
Yeah, actually, so I'm going to tell a personal story here, which let's do this on a podcast, James. Let's do
Why
this
not?
now. But a few years ago, I did go through, I had a couple of bereavements, and, it does really affect you. And at the same time, I gave myself a head injury.
Right. Okay.
It's fine.
Do we need to stage an intervention at any point? Just let
Well,
me know. Okay.
I gave myself a little intervention. So
Right. Okay.
I felt like I wasn't recovering from that head injury substantially quickly enough. So I went to see a neurologist, and he started talking to me. He went, "What else is going on in your life?" And I explained, oh, it's grief, blah, blah, blah. Grief, blah, 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 technical term. And so neurologists don't really have a very good bedside manner. So he told me, don't worry, sweetie. You're just having a breakdown. And I went, that sounds
I like
bad.
that.
That sounds bad. Basically, he meant burnout, but or what we describe as burnout. And I said,
by the way, I'm going to change the name of the title of this episode to "Hey, sweetie, you're just having a breakdown." So,
I think you should, honestly.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, just a breakdown? I was like, what? That sounds bad. What's the alternative? And he said, early onset Alzheimer's. And I was like, I'll take the breakdown.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do I do? And he said, therapy, rest, vacation, scale back your working hours. That's all. You just need time.
Look, over the next few episodes, because we're talking about that period of rest and we're talking about how to recover and all of those things, but we really want to explore, I think, what all of these kind of different areas are, because you've given us a really good overview, but we talk about the media, we talk about like the death of local news and stuff like that in the UK. We can talk about how this affects governments and how governments are changing their positions. We could even get your neurologist on to be even, harsher to you again. We got all these people we can talk to.
Just a breakdown.
Right? We got all these people we can talk to, and we're going to try and do that over the next few episodes.
Yes, we will. We will absolutely do that, because this is affecting all of us, I think. And it's not, there's nothing wrong with you. I think we're all whispering it in meeting rooms or in corridors or, in our DMs. But, this is a problem we can all face together. And there are definitely ways forward, but it does, and it will require just a bit of thinking about how we do that. And we'd love to hear, any ways that you've coped with this or you've adapted your own behaviors to it, because I think there's things to learn with that, not just, individually for our listeners, but, I wonder if there are things we should be directing at parts of these industries to help manage this, because we are all reliant on on the attention economy, whether we like it or not. This is really important, not just from an economic perspective, not just from the media's perspective, but also from like a public service perspective. One of the things that we think about or talk about a little bit is what happens in a time of national crisis. If we can't reach people, if we don't have a consistent way of reaching people quickly, what are we going to do?
Well, on that cheery note, let's leave it there, shall we? So,
but
no, that's all good.
Traitors.
Yeah, it's cool, right? There are interesting and good and exciting things that we're going to learn along the way. You can get in touch with us on the YouTube channel in the comments. We do want to hear whatever you have to say. We also have an email address if you're listening on the podcast, which is can I get your attention at
Can I have your attention? Can we have your attention? Let's get it right, shall we?
Can we have your attention at protonmail.com? I will put it in the show notes.
It's only the name of the show.
It's only the name of the show. It's a good start, isn't it? Thank you very much for listening. We will be back with you for another episode very shortly.
Thank you.